My name is Erica, and I'm 28 years old. As a surgical nurse in Boston, I worked countless night shifts to finally buy my own apartment 3 years ago. Growing up, my parents always put my brother Adam's needs first, but I was still proud of my independence. Yesterday, after a grueling 12-hour shift saving lives, I came home to find strangers packing up my belongings. My mother had forged my signature to sell my apartment to fund my brother's Ivy League education. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from. In the comments, hit that like button and subscribe to hear what happened next. I grew up in a middle-class suburb of Boston, with my parents, Margaret and James, and my younger brother, Adam. Our neighborhood was the kind with matching mailboxes and tidy lawns that my dad meticulously maintained every Saturday morning, while my mom prepared Adam for whatever academic competition he had that weekend. My mother worked as a successful real estate agent, always dressed impeccably in tailored suits with not a hair out of place. Her perfectionism extended to every aspect of our lives, especially when it came to Adam. My father was an accountant at a local firm, quiet and passive, who rarely contradicted my mother on anything important. From the earliest days I can remember, there was always a stark difference in how my parents treated Adam and me. Adam was 4 years younger than me, but somehow his needs always came first. He was academically gifted, showing an aptitude for science and math from an early age. My mother saw this as his ticket to greatness and made it her mission to nurture his talent at any cost. I still remember my 10th birthday when my parents canceled my party, because Adam had come down with a mild cold. It wasn't that he was dangerously ill, he just had a runny nose. But my mother insisted he needed absolute quiet to recover. Instead of having friends over for cake and games, I spent my birthday silently reading in my room while my mother fussed over Adam downstairs. This pattern continued throughout our childhood. When I was 16 and made the volleyball team, my parents attended exactly 2 games the entire season. Meanwhile, they never missed a single one of Adam's science fairs or math competitions, even when they had to drive 3 hours each way. The most glaring example of this favoritism happened during my high school graduation. I had worked hard to become salutatorian of my class, an achievement I was incredibly proud of, considering I also worked part-time at the local pharmacy. I had been looking forward to my graduation party for months, inviting friends and even a few teachers who had supported me. 3 days before the party, Adam got invited to a prestigious science competition that happened to fall on the same weekend. Without even consulting me, my mother canceled my graduation party. Adam might never get an opportunity like this again, she explained as she saw my face fall. You'll have other celebrations in your life. When it came time for college, the disparity became even more obvious. Despite my excellent grades and extracurricular activities, my parents made it clear that they had been saving primarily for Adam's education. You're so responsible, Erica, my mother said. We know you can handle working through school. Adam needs to focus entirely on his studies. So I worked. I took out loans. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I worked night shifts at a nursing home while studying during the day. Sometimes I was so exhausted I would fall asleep over my textbooks, waking up with ink smudged on my cheek. But I made it through nursing school and graduated with honors. My graduation ceremony from nursing school was attended only by my father, as my mother had taken Adam to visit potential colleges that weekend. My father brought me a small bouquet of flowers and a card signed by both my parents. Inside was a $50 gift card to a local restaurant. That same month, my parents spent $2,000 on a new computer for Adam because he needed it for his studies. After graduation, I secured a position as a nurse at Boston Memorial Hospital in the surgical department. The hours were grueling and the work was emotionally taxing, but I loved being able to help people when they were most vulnerable. I found purpose in my career that I had never felt within my family. It took me 3 years of careful saving overtime shifts and frugal living, but I finally saved enough for a down payment on a small one-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The day I signed those papers was the proudest day of my life. I invited my family to a small housewarming gathering, but only my father showed up, explaining that my mother and Adam were at an academic advisor meeting for his college applications. Throughout this time, I formed a close friendship with my colleague Sophia, who worked the same shifts in the ER department. She quickly became more like family to me than my actual relatives. Sophia understood me in ways my family never did, celebrating my victories and supporting me through the tough days. When I bought my apartment, she helped me paint the walls and assembled furniture until 2 a.m. toasting with cheap wine when we finally finished. I tried to maintain a relationship with my family despite the years of feeling secondary. I would visit for Sunday dinners once a month and call my parents weekly. I sent Adam care packages at college with homemade cookies and coffee gift cards. I tried to be the bigger person to rise above the favoritism and build adult relationships with my family members. But despite my efforts, the dynamic never really changed. During family gatherings, conversations inevitably centered around Adam's accomplishments and potential. When I mentioned a difficult surgery I had assisted with, or a patient I had helped, my mother would nod distractedly before steering the conversation back to Adam's latest academic achievement. I worked hard to establish boundaries to build my own life separate from the shadow of being Adam's sister. My apartment became my sanctuary, a physical manifestation of my independence and accomplishment. The walls were painted in colors I chose, decorated with art that spoke to me. Every piece of furniture, every dish in the cabinets was something I had selected and paid for myself. Little did I know that my mother saw my hard-earned property, not as the symbol of my independence that it was to me, but as a resource she could exploit for her golden child's benefit. The day everything fell apart started like any other. I had just finished a 12-hour overnight shift in the surgical ward. We'd had a major trauma case come in around 3 a.m., a car accident victim with internal bleeding. Our team worked frantically for hours to save him, and we did, but it left me emotionally and physically drained. All I could think about as I drove home was taking a hot shower and collapsing into my bed. The spring sun was already bright as I parked in my usual spot outside my apartment building, a modest but well-maintained brick structure with window boxes where I had planted herbs and flowers. As I trudged up the stairs to the third floor, I noticed something odd. There were sounds coming from inside my apartment. The scrape of furniture being moved muffled voices. My first thought was burglars, but burglars don't usually come in the morning when people are awake. Still, my heart raced as I cautiously put my key in the lock and opened the door. What I saw inside stopped me cold. 3 men in uniform were packing my belongings into boxes. My bookshelves were already empty, the books stacked in neat piles next to cardboard containers. My couch was wrapped in plastic. The artwork had been removed from the walls, leaving ghostly rectangles where they had hung. "Excuse me," I said, my voice coming out higher than normal. "What are you doing in my apartment?" The oldest of the men, gray-haired with a clipboard, looked up with a professional smile. "Good morning, ma'am. We're with Superior Moving Company. We're packing up this unit for the new owners. They take possession next week." I felt like I had stepped into some bizarre alternate reality. There must be some mistake. This is my apartment. I haven't sold it. The man's smile faltered as he reached for his clipboard. "Are you Erica Palmer?" "Yes, that's me." "Well, Ms. Palmer, we have the paperwork right here. This property was sold last week. The closing documents were all signed and processed. We were hired by the new owners to pack and move out the current contents." My knees felt weak as I reached for the papers he held out. And there, it was a document with my name and what appeared to be my signature authorizing the sale of my apartment. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close enough to fool someone who didn't know better, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. The slight curl of the E, the way the A was formed. It was my mother's handwriting. "This isn't my signature," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't sign this. I didn't sell my apartment." The movers exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Ma'am, we just go where we're told. If there's some kind of issue with the sale, you'll need to contact your real estate agent or lawyer." I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and called my mother. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I texted her, "Why is there a moving company in my apartment? Call me now." Next, I called my father at work. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice cautious. "Dad, there are movers in my apartment saying it's been sold. What's going on?" There was a long pause. "Your mother was going to talk to you about this." He finally said, his voice quiet. "Talk to me about what?" I nearly shouted. "Adam got accepted to Harvard Medical School," he said, as if this explained everything. What does that have to do with my apartment? Another pause. We emptied our savings for his undergraduate degree. Medical school is much more expensive. Your mother figured out a way to make it work. The realization of what he was saying hit me like a physical blow. By selling my apartment without my knowledge, by forging my signature. She thought you would understand, my father said weakly. Adam's future as a doctor will benefit the whole family, and you're doing well, you can find another place to live. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad, that's fraud. It's illegal. How could you let her do this? His voice became defensive. Your mother felt that after everything we've done for you, you owed the family this much. It's not like we raised you for free, Erica. I was speechless. The movers had stopped working and were pretending not to listen, but their discomfort was palpable. Where am I supposed to live? I asked, tears now streaming down my face. I have nowhere to go. Your mother thought you could stay with that friend of yours, the one from the hospital, until you find a new place. My father replied, as if this was a perfectly reasonable solution. I hung up without saying goodbye, then collapsed onto my half-dismantled couch and sobbed. One of the movers awkwardly offered me a tissue from a box they hadn't packed yet. With shaking hands, I called Sophia, trying to explain through my tears what was happening. She arrived 20 minutes later, took one look at the scene, and took charge. Stop packing, she told the movers firmly. This property has been fraudulently sold. My friend did not authorize this sale, and that's not her signature on those documents. The head mover scratched his balding head. Look, we're just doing our job. We need authorization from the moving company to stop. While Sophia argued with them, I took photos of all the documents, including the forged signature. Eventually, the moving company supervisor was called, and after I explained the situation, they agreed to suspend the move pending resolution of the misunderstanding. After the movers left, Sophia helped me gather essential items into a suitcase. You're staying with me until we figure this out, she said in a tone that brooked no argument. And first thing tomorrow, we're talking to a lawyer. As I looked around at my partially dismantled life, the place I had worked so hard for now in boxes and disarray, a cold determination replaced my shock and sadness. This betrayal was too great to ignore or forgive. For the first time in my life, I was going to stand up to my mother no matter the cost. In the days that followed, I felt like I was moving underwater, everything slow and distorted. I stayed on Sophia's pull-out couch, wearing borrowed pajamas, and trying to make sense of my new reality. I took emergency leave from the hospital, unable to focus on patient care while my life was imploding. With Sophia's encouragement, I met with her friend Julian, who worked as a paralegal at a law firm. He helped me understand my options and connected me with a lawyer who specialized in fraud cases. This is straightforward identity theft and fraud, the lawyer Ms. Abrams explained during our consultation. The fact that the perpetrator is your mother doesn't change the illegality. You have two options: press criminal charges, which could result in your mother facing jail time, or pursue a civil lawsuit to recover your property and damages. I couldn't imagine my mother in jail despite what she'd done. But I also couldn't let her get away with stealing my home. Ms. Abrams helped me file for an emergency injunction to halt the final transfer of property while we gathered evidence. Meanwhile, I still hadn't directly confronted my mother. She had been avoiding my calls, sending only brief texts, claiming we would talk soon, and asking me to be reasonable about Adam's future. Each message made my blood boil. After nearly a week of this limbo, I decided it was time for a direct confrontation. I didn't warn them I was coming. Instead, I drove to my parents' house on Sunday evening, knowing they would be having their regular family dinner, which typically included Adam when he was in town. I parked my car down the street, not wanting to alert them to my presence, before I made it to the door. The familiar walk up the paved driveway felt surreal, like I was approaching a place I had only seen in dreams rather than the house where I had grown up. I rang the doorbell instead of using my key, suddenly feeling like a stranger. My father answered, his face falling when he saw me. "Erica," he said, his voice strained. "We weren't expecting you." "Clearly," I replied, pushing past him into the foyer. I could smell my mother's signature Sunday pot roast wafting from the kitchen. I walked directly to the dining room, where I found my mother setting the table with her good china, the kind reserved for special occasions. Adam was sitting at the table scrolling through his phone. They both looked up when I entered. "Erica," My mother exclaimed with artificial brightness. What a surprise! I've been meaning to call you to discuss some exciting developments. You mean how you committed fraud by forging my signature to sell my apartment without my knowledge or consent? I asked, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through me. Adam's eyes widened and he looked between me and our mother. What is she talking about, Mom? My mother's smile tightened as she carefully placed the last fork on the table. Why don't we all sit down and have dinner? We can discuss everything calmly like adults. No, I don't want pot roast. I want answers, I said. And I want them now. My father had followed me into the dining room and now stood awkwardly in the doorway. Erica, please. Your brother has some wonderful news. Oh, I've heard, I said, not taking my eyes off my mother. Harvard Medical School, right? Congratulations, Adam. Did you know your acceptance was funded by stealing my home? Adam at least had the decency to look shocked. What, Mom? What is Erica talking about? My mother sighed dramatically as if I was being unreasonable. I was going to discuss this with you properly, Erica. If you had answered my calls instead of overreacting and involving lawyers. Overreacting? I repeated, incredulous. You committed a felony. I did what was necessary for this family. My mother said, her voice hardening. Adam's education is an investment in all our futures. He's going to be a doctor, Erica, a surgeon. Do you know what that means for our family's status, our security? And my home was just collateral damage, I asked. You've always been selfish, my mother snapped, finally dropping her pleasant facade. You can find another apartment. Adam needs this more than you need an extra bedroom in that ridiculous herb garden. I looked at my father. And you went along with this. He looked down at his shoes. Your mother thought it was for the best. Adam's opportunity is once in a lifetime. And what about my opportunity? I asked. The home I worked overtime shifts for years to afford, the first place that was ever truly mine. Oh, please, my mother scoffed. You're a nurse. You didn't exactly reach for the stars, did you? Adam has real potential. Her words hit me like a slap. All my life I had internalized the message that I was less important, less worthy of investment and pride. But hearing her say it so baldly, so dismissively, something broke inside me. I save lives, I said quietly. Every day I help people survive their worst moments. I comfort them when they're scared. I ease their pain when they're suffering. I worked for everything I have while you handed everything to Adam on a silver platter. Adam finally spoke up. Wait, Mom, you sold Erica's apartment without telling her. For my tuition. My mother turned to him with a softer expression. It's all taken care of, sweetheart. We've arranged everything so you won't have to worry about finances during medical school. You can focus entirely on your studies. Adam looked uncomfortable. But that's not right. It's Erica's place. I felt a small surge of gratitude toward my brother, but it was quickly extinguished by my mother's next words. Don't be naive, Adam. Success requires sacrifice. Sometimes others have to sacrifice for the greater good. Erica has a steady job. She'll recover. Your education is the priority right now. So that's it, I asked. You're not even sorry. My mother straightened the already perfect table setting. I did what any mother would do to secure her child's future. I'm your child too, I said, my voice breaking. And you've always been able to take care of yourself, she replied. That's the difference between you and Adam. He needs our support to reach his potential. You're more basic in your needs and aspirations. My father finally attempted to intervene. Margaret, that's not fair to Erica. Life isn't fair, James, my mother snapped. We can't afford Harvard and Erica's apartment. A choice had to be made. I looked at each of them, these people who were supposed to be my family, who were supposed to love me. You didn't have to make a choice. You could have talked to me. You could have asked for help. Instead, you stole from me and broke the law. My mother's face hardened. So what now, Erica? You're going to press charges against your own mother, tear this family apart because of some property. You already tore this family apart, I said. You've been doing it my entire life by treating me like I don't matter. She gave me a cold look. Either accept this for the good of the family, or you're no longer part of this family. It's that simple. In that moment, something shifted inside me. All my life, I had been seeking approval from a woman who would never give it, trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. "Goodbye, Mom," I said quietly. "Dad, Adam." I turned and walked toward the door. "Erica, wait." Adam called after me, but I didn't stop. As I walked back to my car, I felt both heavier and lighter. Heavier with the weight of final confirmation that my mother would never value me the way she valued my brother. Lighter with the sudden clear knowledge that I no longer needed to try to earn her approval. It was time to fight for myself because clearly no one else in my family was going to. The weeks that followed my confrontation with my family were some of the darkest of my life. Living on Sophia's couch, I felt displaced, not just physically, but emotionally. Everything I had believed about my place in the world, about the safety net that family was supposed to provide, had been violently upended. During the day, I went through the motions at work, returning to my shifts after my emergency leave ended. The hospital routine provided some sense of normalcy, but I found myself struggling to focus. One afternoon, I nearly administered the wrong dosage of medication to a post-operative patient, catching myself at the last moment. The incident shook me deeply, and I realized I couldn't continue to care for others when I was so broken myself. "I think I need more time off," I told my supervisor, Dr. Warner, after the medication incident. To my surprise, she was understanding. "Take the time you need, Erica," she said. "Your patients deserve your best, and you can't give that right now. It's not your fault, but it's your responsibility to recognize when you need help." Those words stuck with me, recognizing when I needed help. All my life, I had prided myself on my self-sufficiency, on never asking for help, even when I desperately needed it. Now, I was learning that sometimes strength meant acknowledging vulnerability. With my day suddenly empty, I threw myself into working with Ms. Abrams to build my case. We gathered bank records, documented the forgery, and filed the necessary legal paperwork. The process was slow and painful, forcing me to confront the magnitude of my mother's betrayal over and over. "What you're experiencing is a form of grief," Ms. Abrams told me during one of our meetings. "You're mourning the loss of the mother you thought you had, the family you wished you had." Her words gave shape to the hollow feeling in my chest. I was grieving not just for my apartment, but for the fantasy I had maintained that somewhere beneath the favoritism and dismissal, my mother truly loved me. The grief manifested physically. I lost weight, my appetite vanishing. Sleep became elusive, and when I did manage to drift off, I had vivid nightmares about being locked out of my own home while my family watched through the windows. Some days it was all I could do to get out of bed and shower. Sophia noticed my deterioration and suggested I see a therapist. "You're going through trauma, Erica. Legal help is only one kind of support you need right now." I resisted at first, clinging to my self-image as someone who handled problems independently. But after a particularly bad night where I woke up sobbing, convinced I was back in my childhood bedroom, listening to my parents praise Adam downstairs, I made an appointment. Dr. Torres, my therapist, helped me see patterns I had been blind to my entire life. "What you're describing is a form of emotional abuse called scapegoating," she explained during our second session. "In family systems like yours, one child becomes the repository for all negative projections, while another becomes idealized." I began to recognize how this dynamic had shaped my entire personality, my drive for independence, my career choice, even my relationships. I had always chosen friends and romantic partners who were emotionally unavailable, replicating the dynamic I knew from home, where I had to work for every scrap of affection. "The hardest part of healing from family trauma," Dr. Torres told me, "is accepting that you didn't deserve what happened to you. There was nothing wrong with you. The dysfunction was in the system, not in you." These sessions were painful but illuminating. For the first time, I was examining the foundation my life was built upon, and finding that much of what I had accepted as normal was anything but. While working through these emotional revelations, I received an unexpected call from my Aunt Diane, my mother's estranged sister who lived in California. Somehow she had heard about the situation, probably through extended family gossip. "I'm not surprised," she said when I confirmed what had happened. "Margaret always did see other people as extensions of herself rather than individuals with their own rights." I had only met Aunt Diane a handful of times in my life. My mother had cut ties with her years ago over some perceived slight that was never clearly explained to me. Hearing from her now felt like finding a missing puzzle piece. "Did she treat you the same way?" I asked. Aunt Diane laughed without humor. "Oh, yes. In our family, Margaret was the golden child and I was the problem. Our mother enabled it just like your father enables Margaret. It's a generational pattern." She told me stories about their childhood that mirrored my own experiences with Adam. How my mother had been given opportunities that Aunt Diane was denied, how their parents had justified the disparity, with similar excuses to the ones my parents used with me. "I wish I had been there for you more," Aunt Diane said. "I suspected what was happening, but Margaret kept such tight control over family interactions. I should have tried harder to stay connected." "You're here now," I told her, surprised by how comforting it was to have my experiences validated by someone who truly understood. Aunt Diane offered not just emotional support, but practical help as well, sending money to help with my legal fees and calling regularly to check on me. Her presence in my life felt like a lifeline to a different kind of family relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than control and obligation. As my therapy progressed and my legal case moved forward, I faced a crucial decision: whether to pursue criminal charges against my mother. Ms. Abram laid out the options clearly. "The evidence for fraud and identity theft is solid," she explained. "Your mother could face not just financial penalties, but jail time. It's ultimately your decision whether to pursue that route or focus on the civil case to recover your property and damages." I agonized over the decision. Part of me wanted my mother to face the full consequences of her actions, to experience for once in her life what it felt like to not be protected and privileged. But another part of me recoiled at the thought of being the person who sent my own mother to jail, no matter what she had done. "What would justice look like for you?" Dr. Torres asked me during a session where I wrestled with this question. "Not what would punish your mother most, but what would help you heal and move forward." I sat with that question for days, turning it over in my mind. As I walked through the city, as I lay awake at night on Sophia's couch, as I sorted through the few possessions I had taken from my apartment before it was emptied. Justice, I finally decided, wasn't about punishment. It was about restoration, about setting things right. It was about standing up for myself in a way I never had before. And it was about making sure my mother understood, truly understood what she had done. With that clarity, I made my decision. I would proceed with both the criminal and civil cases, not out of vengeance, but out of respect for myself and the life I had built against all odds. It was time for the pattern to break, for the truth to come to light, no matter how painful the process might be. Armed with the evidence Ms. Abrams had helped me collect, I filed a formal police report for identity theft and forgery. The detective assigned to my case, a middle-aged woman named Detective Rivera, listened to my story with a mixture of sympathy and professional detachment. "Family fraud cases are more common than you might think," she told me, "but that doesn't make them any less criminal. We'll investigate thoroughly." I provided her with the forged documents, bank records, and text messages between me and my parents after the discovery. Detective Rivera assured me they would move forward with the investigation and keep me updated on developments. The legal wheels began turning, slow but inexorable. Within 2 weeks, my mother received formal notice that she was under investigation for fraud and identity theft. The reaction was swift and explosive. My phone immediately began buzzing with messages and calls from family members. My mother's text was brief and cold. "I hope you're satisfied with destroying this family." My father called, his voice pleading. "Erica, please reconsider this. Your mother was only trying to help Adam. We can work this out privately as a family." "She had that chance," I reminded him. "She chose to steal from me instead of asking for help." The most surprising reaction came from Adam. He showed up at the hospital during one of my shifts, waiting for me in the cafeteria during my break. "I had no idea, Erica," he said, looking genuinely distressed. "I swear I didn't know what Mom did until you came over that night." I studied my brother's face. We looked similar, both having our father's brown eyes and our mother's straight nose. But Adam had always been softer, protected from harsh realities by our parents' coddling. "Would it have mattered if you did know?" I asked him. "Be honest." He flinched, then looked down at his hands. "I don't know. I'd like to think I would have stopped her, but—" He trailed off. "But you've always accepted what they gave you, without questioning where it came from, or at whose expense," I finished for him. He nodded miserably. "I'm starting to see that. And I'm sorry, Erica, for everything. Not just this, but for all the years I didn't notice how differently they treated us." His apology surprised me. It was the first time anyone in my immediate family had acknowledged the disparity in our treatment. It wasn't enough to fix things, but it was something. "What will you do about Harvard?" I asked him. "I've deferred my acceptance," he said, "and I'm looking into student loans and scholarships. I should have done that from the beginning like you did for nursing school." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Part of me wanted to comfort him to fall back into the pattern of taking care of others at my own expense. But another part, the part I was learning to listen to in therapy, knew that this was a necessary growth experience for him. As the investigation progressed, more details came to light. Detective Rivera informed me that my mother had been planning the fraud for months. Bank records showed she had opened a new account in my name using my personal information 3 months before the sale. Even more disturbing, the investigation uncovered that this wasn't the first time my mother had forged my signature. There were student loan documents from years earlier, with my forged signature as a co-guarantor loans I had never known about. "She's been using your identity for financial purposes for years," Detective Rivera explained. "This apartment sale was just the most blatant instance." The revelation sent me spiraling into another round of therapy sessions, trying to process the depth of the betrayal. How long had my mother seen me not as her daughter, but as a financial resource to exploit for Adam's benefit? Meanwhile, the sale of my apartment had been frozen by court order, but the damage was already done. The apartment had been emptied, my possessions placed in storage. I was still living with Sophia, though I had begun looking for a new place, something temporary until my case was resolved. The breaking point came when my mother was formally charged with fraud, identity theft, and forgery. The district attorney had found enough evidence to pursue criminal charges, and my mother was facing potential jail time. The bank froze the proceeds from the apartment sale pending the outcome of the case. This had an unexpected consequence. Harvard rescinded Adam's admission upon learning that his tuition would have been paid with fraudulently obtained funds. I learned this from my father, who called me sounding more defeated than I had ever heard him. "Adams lost his spot at Harvard," he said, "and your mother's real estate broker license has been suspended pending the outcome of the criminal case. Our lives are falling apart, Erica." For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old guilt, the ingrained sense that it was my responsibility to fix things, to sacrifice for the family's well-being. But Dr. Torres' words echoed in my mind. "You didn't cause this situation. You are responding to it in a healthy way by protecting yourself." "I'm sorry, Dad," I said, and I meant it. "But this is the consequence of Mom's choices, not mine." After a long pause, he surprised me. "You're right," he said quietly. "I've enabled her for so long, looked the other way when she favored Adam, told myself it was normal for parents to have different relationships with different children. But what she did to you, there's no justifying that. I've failed you as a father, Erica, and I'm truly sorry." It was the first genuine apology I had ever received from either of my parents. It didn't heal the wound, but it felt like the first stitch in what would be a long process of repair. The case moved forward, and my mother was required to appear in court for a preliminary hearing. I attended, sitting in the back of the courtroom watching, as my mother, always so proud and put together, stood before the judge in a conservative suit that couldn't quite mask how much weight she had lost. The judge was stern as she reviewed the evidence. "Mrs. Palmer, the charges against you are extremely serious. Identity theft is a felony offense, and the fact that the victim is your own daughter makes this case particularly troubling." My mother attempted to explain her actions, her voice taking on the persuasive, reasonable tone she had always used to get her way. "Your Honor, this was a family matter that has been blown out of proportion. I was only trying to secure my son's education. My daughter has always been independent and resourceful. I knew she would land on her feet. The judge was unmoved. That is not your decision to make, Mrs. Palmer. Your daughter is an adult with legal rights to her property and identity. What you have described is not parental guidance, but criminal activity. My mother's face flushed with anger and humiliation. As she turned to leave the courtroom, her eyes met mine for a brief moment. Instead of remorse, I saw only resentment and blame. Outside the courthouse, reporters from local news outlets approached me, having caught wind of the unusual case. "Is it true your mother sold your apartment to pay for your brother's medical school?" one asked, microphone extended toward me. I hesitated, uncomfortable with public attention, but also aware that my story might help others. "Yes," I finally said, "and I hope that by speaking out, I can help other people recognize financial abuse within families. It's more common than people realize, and it's not okay even when it's done in the name of love." The story ran on the evening news, and to my surprise, it struck a chord with viewers. The hospital where I worked organized a fundraiser to help me with housing costs and legal fees. Cards and letters arrived from strangers who had experienced similar situations with family members. One elderly woman wrote, "I let my son use my credit for years, believing it was my duty as a mother. It wasn't until I was facing foreclosure that I realized love doesn't mean letting someone destroy you. Thank you for having the courage I never found." The public support was overwhelming and unexpected. For someone who had spent her life feeling overlooked and undervalued, the validation was both healing and disorienting. People cared. People saw my pain. People thought I deserved better. It was a revelation. With the help of the fundraiser and a loan from Aunt Diane, I secured a small studio apartment as a temporary home. It wasn't what I had lost, but it was mine, and it was safe. Sophia helped me shop for essential furniture at thrift stores, and colleagues from the hospital donated household items. As the criminal case proceeded, my mother made a last-ditch attempt at reconciliation, or what she considered reconciliation. She invited me to meet at a cafe, a public place, where she perhaps felt I would be less likely to make a scene. I agreed to the meeting with Ms. Abrams's knowledge, curious about what my mother would say now that she was facing real consequences for perhaps the first time in her life. She was waiting when I arrived, looking immaculate as always, but with new lines around her mouth and eyes. She stood to greet me, arms outstretched for a hug that I didn't reciprocate. We sat across from each other, two strangers connected by blood and trauma. "Erica," she began, her voice gentle, in the way it only was when she wanted something. "I think this has gone far enough. We're family. Families forgive each other. I'm willing to apologize if that's what you need to move forward." "An apology would be a start," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "But it would need to be genuine." She reached across the table to take my hand. I let her, watching her performance with a detachment that would have been impossible just months ago. "I am sorry, darling," she said, her eyes widening with practiced sincerity. "I never meant to hurt you. I was only thinking of our family's future, of Adam's potential. You've always been so strong and independent. I thought you would understand once I explained." "Understand that you committed a felony?" I asked. "That you stole my home? That you've been using my identity for years without my knowledge?" Her expression flickered, the mask of contrition slipping for a moment. "That's such harsh language, Erica. I'm your mother. Everything I've ever done has been for this family." "No," I said calmly. "Everything you've ever done has been for Adam and for yourself. I was never included in your definition of family, except when you needed something from me." Her grip on my hand tightened painfully. "If you continue with this vindictive crusade," she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper, "you will destroy everything. Adam's career, your father's reputation, my freedom. Is that what you want? To punish us all because you couldn't share what you had?" I pulled my hand away, a calm clarity washing over me. "That's the difference between us, Mom. I would have shared if you had asked. I would have helped Adam if you had treated me with respect and honesty. But you didn't ask. You took. And now you're facing the consequences of that choice." I stood to leave, but she caught my wrist. "If you walk away now, there's no coming back," she threatened. "Family is forever, Erica. You'll regret choosing pride over blood." Looking down at her, this woman who had given birth to me but never truly seen me, I felt a complicated mix of sadness, anger, and finally freedom. "I'm not choosing pride, Mom. I'm choosing self-respect, something you never taught me." As I walked away, I heard her call after me, her voice rising despite the public setting. "After everything I sacrificed for you, this is how you repay motherhood." I didn't turn back. The woman I was now, the woman who had survived her betrayal and was rebuilding her life, knew better than to be pulled back into her manipulation. The court case moved forward with surprising speed. My mother, facing overwhelming evidence, eventually accepted a plea deal on the advice of her attorney. The terms required full restitution of the apartment sale proceeds, plus additional damages, community service, and probation instead of jail time. The judge who approved the settlement didn't mince words during the hearing. "Mrs. Palmer, the court shows leniency not because your actions are in any way excusable, but in consideration of your age and lack of prior criminal record. Make no mistake, what you did to your daughter was not an act of love, but an act of theft and betrayal of trust. I sincerely hope you use your probation period to reflect on the damage you have caused to your family bonds." My mother sat stiffly as the judge spoke, her face a careful mask. I wondered if any of the words penetrated her self-justification, if she was capable of the kind of self-reflection the judge encouraged. The settlement money allowed me to search for a new permanent home. After weeks of looking, I found a 2-bedroom apartment in a different neighborhood than my original place. It was newer, with large windows that filled the space with light, and a small balcony where I could recreate my herb garden. In some ways, it was better than what I had lost. "It's beautiful, Erica," Sophia said when she helped me move in. "It feels like you." She was right. In furnishing this new place, I made choices that reflected who I had become through this ordeal, not who I had been. Gone were the safe, neutral colors I had chosen for my first apartment, which had unconsciously mirrored my attempt to make myself smaller and less noticeable in my family. Instead, I chose bold blues for the living room, a rich emerald for the bedroom artwork that spoke to me rather than generic prints that wouldn't offend. The second bedroom I set up as a combination guest room and home office, a space that was mine to use as I chose. No longer was I leaving room for family members who never visited or appreciated my hospitality. While I was rebuilding my physical home, I was also rebuilding my sense of family. My relationship with my father entered a new phase when he began attending counseling on his own, something I never would have expected from him. "I've been passive my whole life," he told me during a careful lunch meeting. "With your mother, with you kids at work. I let things happen around me without taking responsibility. I don't want to be that person anymore." He was making an effort to connect with me independently of my mother calling weekly to check in, and actually listening when I spoke. It was awkward and sometimes painful, but it was also genuine. We were getting to know each other as adults, without my mother's influence shadowing our interactions. Adam's situation had changed dramatically as well. With Harvard no longer an option, and our parents' financial resources depleted by the legal case, he had to adjust his expectations. He enrolled in a state medical school, taking out student loans like countless other students. He found a part-time job in a research lab to help with expenses, experiencing for the first time what it meant to work for his education, rather than having it handed to him. "It's harder than I expected," he admitted during one of our infrequent but increasingly honest conversations. "But also, I don't know, more satisfying. When I do well on an exam now, I know it's because I studied for it, not because Mom hired me a tutor or Dad pulled an all-nighter helping me prepare." I could hear the growth in his words, painful as the circumstances had been. "That's what real accomplishment feels like," I told him. "It's yours. No one can take it away or take credit for it." Our relationship was still fragile, burdened by years of unequal treatment and the recent trauma, but there was potential for something healthier than what we'd had before. Adam was seeing our family dynamic clearly for perhaps the first time in his life, and that clarity created possibility. My mother was the only family member with whom reconciliation seemed impossible. She served her community service hours with rigid compliance, but showed no genuine remorse. In her mind, she remained the victim of an ungrateful daughter's vindictiveness. The few messages she sent through my father continued to frame the situation as a betrayal on my part rather than hers. Dr. Torres helped me process my feelings about this estrangement. Estrangement from a parent is sometimes presented as a failure, she said during one of our sessions. But in cases of abuse and exploitation, it can be the healthiest choice. It's okay to protect yourself from people who have repeatedly shown they will harm you, even if those people are family. I found unexpected validation in these words. The little girl inside me who had desperately wanted her mother's approval was still there, still hurt, but the woman I had become understood that no relationship was worth the price of my self-respect. Beyond my biological family, I was building connections with people who truly saw and valued me. Sophia, who had stood by me through the darkest moments. My colleagues at the hospital who had supported me practically and emotionally. Aunt Diane, who called weekly from California and was planning a visit. And new friends I made through a support group for survivors of family financial abuse. People who understood without explanation what I had experienced. My professional life transformed as well. Returning to nursing after my leave of absence, I found myself relating to patients with a deeper empathy. Having experienced vulnerability and betrayal, I was more attuned to the emotional needs of people facing illness and uncertainty. Several patients commented on my compassionate care, and I received a nomination for the hospital's annual Nursing Excellence Award. I also began speaking occasionally at community centers about financial abuse within families, sharing my story, in the hope of helping others recognize warning signs I had missed. Each time I spoke, at least one person would approach me afterward, with tears in their eyes, recognizing their own situation in my words. I never had a name for what was happening. One young woman told me after a presentation, "I thought I was crazy for feeling used by the people who are supposed to love me most. Hearing you speak makes me feel like maybe I'm not crazy after all." 1 year after the day I came home to find movers in my apartment, I hosted a housewarming party in my new place. The apartment was filled with friends, colleagues, and my chosen family. My father came briefly, still uncomfortable in social situations, but making an effort. Adam stopped by toward the end, bringing a houseplant as a gift. Notably absent was my mother, who had declined the invitation relayed through my father with a curt message about not being where I'm not wanted. As I looked around at the people gathered in my new home, I realized something profound had shifted inside me. The loss of my first apartment, traumatic as it was, had forced me to find my voice and claim my worth in ways I might never have done otherwise. In losing the physical space I had worked so hard for, I had gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I deserved respect, honesty, and love that didn't come with conditions. A little over a year has passed since I discovered my mother's betrayal, and I'm sitting in my new apartment watching the morning light filter through the gauzy curtains I chose myself. My herb garden on the balcony is thriving basil and mint, releasing their fragrance when I water them each morning. The journey to this moment of peace wasn't linear. There were days when grief would ambush me when I'd find myself crying in the shower over not just my lost apartment, but the mother I never really had. There were nights when anger kept me awake, rehearsing all the things I wished I'd said during confrontations. There were moments of doubt when the ingrained guilt resurfaced, whispering that maybe I should have just accepted the theft for family harmony. But those moments grew less frequent with time and work with therapy and support, with the creation of new patterns to replace the dysfunctional ones I'd grown up with. One unexpected change was in my relationship with material possessions. Having lost nearly everything once I found myself both more appreciative of the things I chose to bring into my new home and less attached to them as sources of security. My worth wasn't in what I owned, but in who I was becoming. I joined a support group specifically for survivors of family betrayal, people who understood the unique pain of being hurt by those who were supposed to protect you. The shared experiences and validation helped heal wounds that therapy alone couldn't quite reach. In that safe space, I could express anger without being judged, acknowledge grief without being told to get over it, and celebrate small victories in boundary setting that might seem insignificant to others. Through the group, I began mentoring younger nurses who came from difficult family backgrounds. Many of them were working themselves to exhaustion, trying to prove their worth or support family members who took advantage of their caring nature. Seeing my past patterns in these young women, I could offer guidance I wish someone had given me years earlier. Your compassion is a strength, I would tell them, but it shouldn't come at the cost of your own well-being. With my own family, I established clear, healthy boundaries. My father and I meet twice a month for lunch conversations that have grown increasingly honest over time. He's still married to my mother, still lives in the house where I grew up, but he makes the effort to maintain a separate relationship with me that isn't filtered through her perception. I should have protected you, he said during one of these lunches, his voice cracking. Instead, I stood by and watched Margaret chip away at your confidence, your security for years. I failed you as a father. His acknowledgement meant more than I could express, not because it erased the past, but because it validated my experience and showed his commitment to truth rather than comfortable denial. My relationship with Adam has evolved into something cautiously hopeful. The privileged boy who expected the world to accommodate him is being replaced by a young man who's learning about consequences and effort. His experience with student loans and part-time work has humbled him in necessary ways. I never realized how hard you worked, all, he told me during a rare dinner together. All those years I just thought, I don't know, I guess I thought money and opportunities just happened. I didn't see how mom and dad gave me everything and expected you to make it on your own. His growing awareness doesn't erase the hurt of our childhood, but it opens the possibility of a more balanced adult relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than the assigned roles of our youth. My mother remains the one relationship where reconciliation seems impossible. She has never acknowledged the wrong in what she did, maintaining that her actions were justified by Adam's needs. The few messages she sends through my father continue to cast her as the victim of my vindictiveness and lack of family loyalty. After months of agonizing over what forgiveness might look like in this situation, I reached a place of acceptance that surprised me. Forgiveness, I realized, didn't require reconciliation or even contact. It didn't mean pretending the harm never happened or allowing the harmful behavior to continue. For me, forgiveness meant releasing the hope that the past could be different, accepting that my mother was unlikely to change, and choosing to build a life not defined by her betrayal. This understanding brought a freedom I hadn't expected. I no longer wasted energy hoping for an apology that would never come, or recognition she couldn't give. I could acknowledge that my mother was shaped by her own experiences and limitations, while also protecting myself from further harm. My professional life flourished in ways I couldn't have anticipated. The empathy developed through my own trauma translated into more compassionate patient care. I became known on my unit as someone who could connect with difficult patients, who could find the human being behind the anger or fear that often accompanied illness. When a nursing leadership position opened on our unit, my supervisor encouraged me to apply. "You've shown exceptional resilience and growth," she said. "Those are qualities we need in leadership." I was surprised by the suggestion, having never seen myself in a leadership role. But the events of the past year had changed me. I had learned to speak up, to trust my judgment, to advocate not just for others, but for myself as well. I applied for and got the position, finding unexpected fulfillment in mentoring newer nurses and helping shape unit policies. Beyond my professional growth, I began using my story to advocate for stronger legal protections against family financial fraud. I worked with a local community legal aid office to develop educational materials about financial boundaries within families, red flags for exploitation, and resources for those who discovered they had been victimized. I even testified before a state legislative committee, considering stronger penalties for identity theft between family members. The familial relationship shouldn't minimize the crime, I told the committee. If anything, it makes the betrayal more severe because it exploits the trust that should exist between family members. Throughout all these changes, my support network expanded and deepened. Sophia remained my closest friend, but I also formed connections with others who accepted me as I was, who didn't require me to minimize myself to make room for their needs. I began dating again cautiously at first, but with a clearer sense of what healthy relationships should feel like. My new apartment became truly mine in ways my first place never quite managed to be. Each object, each color, each piece of furniture reflected choices made with confidence rather than fear of disapproval. I hosted dinner parties and game nights, filling the space with laughter and friendship. The sense of home I created wasn't in the physical structure, but in the safety and authenticity I cultivated within its walls. On the anniversary of the day I discovered the movers in my apartment, I hosted a special gathering that I called my rebirth day. Sophia, my father, Adam, Aunt Diane, who flew in from California, colleagues from the hospital, and friends from my support group all crowded into my living room. We toasted not to what I had lost, but to what I had found: my voice, my boundaries, my authentic self. Looking around at these people who truly saw and valued me, I realized that losing my apartment had led me to find something far more precious than property. I had found the strength to break generational patterns of dysfunction, to create connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation, to build a life that honored my worth rather than diminishing it. The journey wasn't over. Healing rarely follows a neat linear path. There would still be difficult days, triggers that brought back painful memories, moments of doubt, but I face them now from a foundation of self-knowledge and support that made them manageable rather than overwhelming. In the end, what my mother never understood was that true family isn't about blood or obligation or sacrifice that leaves you empty. It's about choice and respect, and the kind of love that builds you up rather than tearing you down. I had lost the family I was born into, but gained one I had chosen and been chosen by in return. And in that choosing, I found a home no one could ever take away from me. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who took advantage of you? Share your experience in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming family betrayal. Thank you for listening to my journey from heartbreak to healing. Remember, sometimes the family we create is more valuable than the one we're born into.